40 years had passed since that day in the border zones. The galaxy had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Humanity had grown from a curious newcomer to an established presence among the stars. 17 colony worlds now flew Earth's flag, and human merchants could be found in trading posts across a dozen sectors. Jack Harper was an old man now. He lived on Aurora Station, a massive orbital platform above Earth that served as both retirement community and museum of early space exploration. His hair had gone completely gray and his hands sometimes shook when he held his coffee. But his mind remained sharp, filled with memories of those early days when everything had been new and dangerous. He spent his mornings writing. His memoirs were almost complete, thousands of pages detailing humanity's first stumbling steps into a galaxy far older and stranger than anyone had imagined. The chapter about Cathara and the Vereen was the one he returned to most often, revising and refining, trying to capture what that moment had meant. Meanwhile, the galaxy itself was falling into crisis. The Krill Dominion, no longer just scattered raiders, had unified under a warlord named Threxus the Conqueror. Using stolen technologies from a dozen conquered species, the Krill had built a war machine that now threatened every civilization in the outer sectors. Ambassador Lisa Grant represented humanity in the Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Sanctum Prime. She was a skilled diplomat, trained in the complex web of alliances and ancient grudges that defined galactic politics, but even her considerable skill struggled against the Council's inertia. The Terrak Confederacy has fallen, she announced to the assembled representatives. 3 core worlds, billions of lives gone in 7 days. The Krill are not raiders anymore. They are conquerors. We must act now together or we will fall separately. The council chamber was a massive dome where hundreds of species gathered. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in specialized environmental bubbles. Some were clouds of gas, others crystalline structures, and a few were artificial intelligences housed in mechanical bodies. The Torval Empire's representative, a being that looked like a floating mass of tentacles and eyes, spoke in a voice that resonated through translation devices. The Torval have defended our territories for 10,000 years. We do not need human advice on military matters. The Krill have reverse-engineered quantum weapons from the Terrak, Lisa pressed. They have adaptive shields from the Zharn Collective, which surrendered without fighting. How long before they combine all these stolen technologies into something none of us can stop? Humanity has been in space for barely a century, hissed the next collective representative, a being of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. You lack the experience to understand galactic warfare. The Council has faced threats before. We will face this one according to proper protocols and established procedures. Lisa knew those protocols. They involved committees, subcommittees, impact studies, and diplomatic negotiations that could take years. The Krill would not wait years. They were moving now, consuming worlds and enslaving populations with terrifying efficiency. She returned to the human embassy frustrated and exhausted. Her assistant, a young man named Peter Cole, brought her the daily intelligence reports. Most were routine: troop movements, economic data, intercepted communications. But one report made her stop. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to a notation about an unusual signal. Captain Ben Cole, no relation, detected it 3 days ago. He commands the defense frigate Liberty on patrol duty near Sector 7. The signal came on an old frequency, one that hasn't been used in decades. It was encrypted using both ancient Earth dialects and something our computers identified as Vereen mathematical notation. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had read Jack Harper's memoirs, including the unpublished chapters. The Vereen, the species he had saved 40 years ago, the ones who had simply disappeared into the unknown regions. What did the message say? We're still working on the full translation, but the basic meaning is clear. The favor will be returned. Prepare your people. The debts of honor come due. Lisa immediately contacted Jack Harper. The old admiral, officially retired but still holding consulting status with Earth Command, arrived at the embassy within hours. He looked at the signal data with eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. "It's them," he said quietly, "after all these years. They remember. But what does it mean?" Lisa asked. "Are they offering to help? Are they warning us about something? The message is too cryptic." Jack studied the mathematical notation, running his fingers across the holographic display. Cathara told me that the Varine always repay their debts. She performed some kind of ceremony, a rite of blood debt. I never really understood what it meant in their culture. Sir, if they're coming back, we need to know their intentions, and we need to know their capabilities. The galaxy has changed in 40 years. For all we know, they might be extinct, and this is just an automated signal from a dead civilization. But Jack didn't think so. Something in his gut, the same instinct that had made him protect that dying Varine ship 4 decades ago, told him that Cathara had survived. More than survived. The Varine had been desperate then, fleeing a plague that was destroying their species. What had they become in the years since? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The Krill Dominion, emboldened by their easy victories, turned their attention to the Vexor Prime system. It was one of humanity's largest colonies, home to over 3 million people. The farms of Vexor Prime fed a dozen human worlds. The orbital stations manufactured components for the entire human fleet. Admiral Kyle Barnes commanded the defense fleet. 12 warships of various classes, from fast frigates to the heavy cruiser Defiant. They were good ships, crewed by well-trained personnel. But intelligence reports showed a Krill armada of 73 vessels approaching the system. Kyle was a practical man. He looked at the numbers and knew they couldn't win. His orders were clear. Delay the enemy as long as possible, evacuate as many civilians as you can, and retreat before the fleet is destroyed. Losing the colony was tragic. Losing the fleet would leave a dozen other systems defenseless. The Krill arrived in Vexor space like a storm. Their ships, cobbled together from stolen technologies, formed a massive wall of firepower. Kyle ordered his fleet into defensive formation around the orbital stations. The civilian evacuation ships, massive transports that normally carried cargo, now packed frightened families into every available space. The battle began badly and got worse. The Krill plasma weapons, stolen from the fallen Terrak Confederacy, cut through human shields like they weren't there. Jamming systems, acquired from the Jarn, locked out human targeting computers. Within the first hour, 4 ships were gone. The Defiant itself had taken critical damage, fires spreading through 3 decks. Kyle prepared to give the evacuation order. Most of the civilians wouldn't make it out. The transport ships were too slow, too vulnerable. But at least some would survive to carry on humanity's legacy. Then space tore open. Kyle had never seen anything like it. Reality simply split apart in 16 different locations around the Vexor system. Not the familiar distortion of faster-than-light travel, but something else entirely. Dimensional rifts, his sensors reported, though that should have been impossible. 16 massive vessels emerged from those rifts. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Their hulls shimmered with an adaptive armor that seemed to shift between solid matter, energy, and something else entirely. Weapons bristled from every surface, designs that Kyle's tactical computer couldn't even identify. "Sir, I'm getting a transmission," his communications officer reported. "Audio only." The voice claims to be eldest Cathara of the Varine. Kyle had heard the stories about Jack Harper's first contact with an alien species. Every officer in the fleet knew those stories. They were legends from humanity's early days in space, but that had been 40 years ago. Could it really be the same Varine that Harper had saved? "Put her through," Kyle ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was musical and strong. Admiral Barnes, humanity honored its word when the galaxy expected none. Humanity showed compassion when cold logic suggested otherwise. Humanity saved my species when it cost you dearly. The Varine pay their debts. Today, you will learn why ancient species once feared us. The Varine warships moved with impossible grace. Their weapons fired and Krill shields simply failed. Not overwhelmed, not penetrated, but turned off as if someone had flipped a switch. Dimensional weapons folded Krill ships into spaces that shouldn't exist, crushing them in gravitational forces that defied physics. The Krill, who had steamrolled through the defenses of ancient civilizations, broke and ran. They abandoned the assault, jumped to faster-than-light travel, and fled the system in complete disarray. Behind them, they left 40 destroyed vessels and not a single Varine casualty. Kyle stared at his tactical display in shock. The entire battle had lasted less than 10 minutes. The Varine had appeared, destroyed the Krill armada, and now their ships simply floated in formation around the human fleet. "This is Admiral Kyle Barnes to Varine vessels," he transmitted. "We owe you our lives and our world. Whatever you need, whatever we can do to thank you, name it." The Meridian drifted through the darkness of space, its sensors sweeping across the empty border zones. Commander Jack Harper stood on the bridge watching the stars through the main view screen. His crew had been on this mapping mission for 3 weeks, and so far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange," Lieutenant Danny Walsh called from the sensor station. His fingers moved quickly across the controls. "There's a ship ahead. Looks damaged, reading multiple hull breaches and failing life support." Jack moved to stand beside his friend. The sensor display showed a vessel unlike anything in their database. It was elegant, curved like a seashell but scarred with weapon burns and leaking atmosphere into the void. "What species?" Jack asked. "Unknown, sir. But they're dying. Life signs are failing fast." Jack made his decision quickly. "Take us in. Prepare medical teams and emergency supplies." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Meridian approached the dying vessel carefully, extending docking tubes to connect with the damaged ship. When the airlock opened, Jack led the first team inside. The interior was beautiful despite the damage. Walls glowed with soft bioluminescent patterns. The air smelled of something like cinnamon and rain. In the central chamber, they found her. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered between blue and silver. Her forearms hung limp at her sides, and her large eyes focused on Jack with difficulty. Blood, purple and thick, seeped from wounds across her torso. "Please," she spoke. And somehow Jack understood her words through a translation device clipped to her collar. "The repository. You must save it." Jack's medical officer, Dr. Helen Carter, rushed forward with supplies. "We need to get her to our ship. She won't survive much longer here." "No," the alien woman gasped. "Listen, I am eldest Cathara of the Vereen. My species is dying. A plague called the Devouring consumes us. This ship carries the last genetic repository of my people. Our children. Our future. Everything we were and could be. We'll save you and the repository," Jack promised. "My ship has medical facilities and—" Alarms screamed across both vessels. Danny's voice crackled through Jack's communicator. "Commander, we have incoming. Multiple vessels, weapons hot. They're Krill raiders." Jack knew the Krill by reputation. Pirates and scavengers who preyed on weak targets in the border zones. Earth's official policy was clear. Avoid engagement, protect the ship, preserve stealth capability for intelligence gathering. "How many?" Jack asked. 6 ships, sir. They're targeting the Vereen vessel. They want the technology." Jack looked at Cathara. She was dying. Her ship was dead in space. The repository she protected represented the survival of an entire species. The choice should have been simple. Follow orders. Stay hidden. Let the galaxy sort out its own problems. But Jack had never been good at simple choices. "Battle stations," he commanded. "All hands prepare for combat. Danny, get me firing solutions on those raiders." "Sir, our orders—" Helen started. "I know our orders, Doctor. Now help me save her." The Meridian's engines flared to life. The small exploration vessel was never meant for combat, but it carried defensive weapons for emergencies. Jack hoped it would be enough. The Krill ships turned their attention to the Meridian as it positioned itself between them and the Vereen vessel. They were larger, better armed, and clearly surprised that a human ship would challenge them. "This is Commander Jack Harper of Earth Vessel Meridian." Jack broadcast on all frequencies. "Break off your attack and leave this sector. We are protecting this vessel under galactic rescue protocols." Harsh laughter filled the communication channel. "Humans. Foolish children playing with technology you barely understand. Move aside or be destroyed." Jack's answer was to fire the Meridian's main railgun. The magnetic accelerator sent a slug of depleted uranium through the lead Krill ship's shield generator. Sparks and atmosphere vented into space as the raiders' shields collapsed. Then the real battle began. The Krill returned fire with plasma weapons that heated the Meridian's hull to dangerous temperatures. Jack ordered evasive maneuvers, using the Vereen ship as partial cover. His crew fought with desperate courage against an enemy that outgunned them 6-1. Danny coordinated the weapon systems with surgical precision. Each shot counted. The Meridian's missiles found weak points in Krill armor. Their point defense systems intercepted incoming fire, but they were taking damage. Hull breaches opened on decks 3 and 4. Environmental controls struggled to maintain atmosphere. "Shield generator at 40%, Danny reported. "We can't take much more of this." Then one of the Krill ships broke formation, accelerating toward the Vereen vessel. They were going to ram it, destroy the repository even if they couldn't steal it. Jack didn't hesitate. He ordered full power to engines and threw the Meridian directly into the raiders' path. The collision was catastrophic. Both ships shuddered from the impact. Metal screamed. Systems failed. But the Meridian held its position, preventing the krill from reaching Cathara's ship. The cost was immediate and terrible. The collision had breached the port side entirely. Jack heard the emergency bulkhead slamming shut, sealing off the damaged sections. He heard the screams cut short as vacuum claimed the crew members who couldn't reach safety in time. "Danny!" he shouted. No response came from the sensor station. Jack turned and saw his friend slumped over the controls, a piece of shrapnel through his chest. The deck was stained with red blood mixing with coolant fluid. The remaining krill ships, perhaps surprised by the ferocity of the human resistance, decided the prize wasn't worth the cost. They retreated, jumping to faster-than-light travel and disappearing into the dark. Jack stood in the ruins of his bridge, surrounded by sparking consoles and the bodies of his crew. They had won, if you could call it winning. 8 people were dead, including Danny Walsh, who had been his closest friend since academy days. Medical teams rushed to save Cathara. They brought her aboard the Meridian, along with the cylindrical container that held the Vereen genetic repository. Dr. Carter worked for 6 hours in surgery. Using techniques adapted on the fly for alien physiology, Cathara survived. As she recovered in the medical bay 3 days later, she asked to speak with Jack. He came, still wearing his torn uniform, exhausted from answering Earth Command's angry questions about why he had engaged in unauthorized combat. "You sacrificed much to save me," Cathara said softly. "Your friend, your crew, your career perhaps. Why?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. "Because it was right. Because you asked for help. Because every species deserves a chance to survive." Cathara reached out with one of her 4 hands and placed it over Jack's heart. She spoke words in her own language, musical and strange. Then she switched to English. "I have performed the rite of blood debt. In Vereen culture, this is the highest honor and the deepest obligation. You saved not just my life, but the future of my species. This debt can never be repaid with mere words or trade goods. Your people have hearts of fire, Commander. In the cold equations of the galaxy, this will either save you or doom you." She paused, her large eyes reflecting the medical bay lights. "But know this. The Vereen remember. We always remember, and we always repay our debts." The Vereen ship, barely functional, departed a week later. Cathara and her precious cargo disappeared into the unknown regions of space. Jack Harper returned to Earth, where he faced formal hearings for violating first contact protocols and engaging in unauthorized military action. The proceedings were long and public. Some called him a hero. Others called him reckless. In the end, diplomatic pressure from species who respected the rescue protocols led to his pardon. But his career in exploration was over. Earth Command reassigned him to administrative duties, pushing him away from the stars he loved. Humanity continued its slow climb among the galactic civilizations. They built colonies, established trade routes, and learned to navigate the complex politics of ancient empires that had ruled the stars for millennia. The incident with the Vereen became a footnote in history, a minor diplomatic incident that was quietly forgotten. But Jack Harper never forgot. On quiet nights, he would look at the stars and wonder what had happened to Cathara and her people. He wondered if they had survived, if the genetic repository had been enough to rebuild their civilization. He wondered if the Vereen truly remembered. The human delegation arrived in the void beyond aboard the exploration ship Horizon. Captain Melanie Ford had been chosen to command the mission because of her steady nerves and diplomatic skills. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what she found. Jack Harper stood beside her on the bridge, officially present as a consultant, but really there because he had started all of this 40 years ago. Ambassador Lisa Grant represented Earth's government, authorized to negotiate on behalf of humanity. Behind them, a team of scientists, engineers, and military observers watched through the viewscreen as impossible wonders unfolded. "Sir, my sensors don't know what to make of this," the science officer reported. "We're detecting spatial anomalies everywhere. Dimensional pockets that fold space-time into configurations that shouldn't exist. The Vereen sanctuary worlds existed partially outside normal reality. Their cities floated in dimensional bubbles where physics operated on negotiable terms. Buildings stretched impossibly upward without supports. Gardens grew in spaces that had no defined up or down. Energy flowed through patterns that human mathematics couldn't describe. Kythera met them at the central plaza of the primary world. She looked different from the dying refugee Jack had saved 4 decades ago. Her body still bore the same elegant form, 4 arms and shimmering blue-silver skin, but her eyes held a confidence and power that came from transformation. "Welcome, Admiral Harper," she said warmly. "Welcome, Ambassador Grant. Welcome to what your kindness built." Jack stepped forward, an old man meeting an alien who hadn't aged a day. "What happened to you?" "To your people? The galaxy thought the Vereen had gone extinct." "We nearly did," Kythera replied, gesturing for them to follow her through the plaza. "The devouring plague consumed 90% of our species before we found the genetic repository you saved. But desperation breeds innovation. We had nothing to lose, so we tried everything. We merged biology with technology. We learned to manipulate dimensions. We rebuilt ourselves from the ground up, incorporating the harsh lessons of survival with discoveries that our old civilization would have considered impossible." They walked through streets where Vereen citizens moved with purpose. Children played in gravity-defying parks. Scientists worked in laboratories that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This was a civilization that had died and been reborn as something greater. "We offer you 3 gifts," Kythera said, leading them to a central chamber where holographic displays showed complex technical schematics. "First, dimensional fold technology. Your ships can mark specific points in space and travel between them instantly, bypassing the limitations of conventional faster-than-light travel." The human scientists leaned forward, studying the data with hungry eyes. Instant travel would revolutionize everything. Trade, communication, military deployment. Every calculation of distance and time would need to be rewritten. Second, adaptive matter synthesis. The ability to create nearly any material structure by manipulating matter at the quantum level. You could build ships, stations, even cities in days instead of years. Melanie Ford whistled softly. The implications were staggering. Resource limitations would become almost meaningless. Construction would be limited only by energy and imagination. Third, genetic optimization techniques. The same methods we use to rebuild ourselves. Extended lifespans, improved health, enhanced capabilities. Nothing that would make you stop being human, but enough to give your species centuries instead of decades. Lisa Grant felt the weight of history pressing down on her. These gifts could transform humanity into something new, powerful enough to stand equal with the galaxy's ancient empires. But she was also a diplomat, trained to see consequences and complications. "The Galactic Council will never allow this," she said carefully. "The old powers maintain their positions through technological advantage and ancient treaties. If humanity suddenly gains access to technology that took them millennia to develop, they'll see it as an existential threat." As if summoning them with her words, a priority message arrived from Sanctum Prime. The Galactic Council had issued an emergency proclamation. The Torval Empire and Nex Collective, speaking for the Council majority, invoked the Technology Restriction Accords. The accords were ancient laws, written thousands of years ago during a period of catastrophic war. They prevented any species from gaining overwhelming technological advantages by limiting how quickly advanced knowledge could be shared. The Council demanded that humanity refuse the Vereen gifts. More, they demanded that the Vereen themselves submit to Council oversight and surrender their advanced technologies for proper regulation and controlled distribution. Jack read the proclamation with growing anger. They're afraid. The old empires have been comfortable for so long they've forgotten how to adapt. They see us as a threat, because we might actually grow strong enough to challenge their dominance. "It's more than that," Lisa said quietly. She had spent years studying galactic politics. The Council species are stagnant. Some haven't had a new idea in millennia. They maintain order through bureaucracy and tradition. Humanity is young, adaptable, ambitious. Give us Vereen technology and we could eclipse them within a generation. They can't allow that without risking everything their civilizations are built on. Jake Morris, the intelligence operative embedded in the delegation, provided additional context from his contacts. The Council's real concern was precedent. If the Vereen could freely share technology with humanity, what stopped other species from doing the same? The entire framework of galactic power dynamics, carefully maintained for thousands of years, could collapse. Kethera listened to all of this with a calm that suggested she had expected it. "I face a difficult choice," she admitted. Open conflict with the Council would devastate the galaxy. The Vereen could win such a war, but at what cost? We would destroy the very civilization we once helped build. But abandoning humanity now after you saved us would dishonor the debt that defines who we are. She was quiet for a long moment, her four hands moving through a gesture that Jack recognized from 40 years ago. It was the same motion she had made when performing the rite of blood debt. "I propose a compromise," Kethera finally said. "Humanity receives the gifts as promised, but you pledge to use them first and foremost for galactic defense. Position yourselves not as conquerors, but as protectors. Show the galaxy that power and compassion can coexist." Jack liked the idea immediately. It aligned with his own values, with the reason he had saved Kethera's ship in the first place. But he also knew he couldn't make this decision alone. Lisa transmitted the proposal back to Earth, where President Linda Hayes and the Global Council debated long into the night. The arguments were fierce and divided into clear camps. Some saw the gifts as humanity's chance to finally stand equal among the stars. For a century, Earth had been the junior species, always scrambling to catch up with civilizations that had mastered space travel before humans had invented writing. This was their opportunity to leap forward. Others feared the unknown consequences. Accepting technology they didn't fully understand could change humanity in ways no one could predict. What if the genetic optimization altered who they were at a fundamental level? What if dimensional technology had side effects they couldn't foresee? Still others worried about the diplomatic fallout. The Council controlled access to major trade routes, neutral territories, and resources scattered across the galaxy. Making enemies of the old powers could isolate humanity for generations. The debate raged through Earth's media. Citizens watched video feeds of the Vereen worlds and argued in digital forums about whether humanity should accept the gifts. Some called it destiny, others called it disaster. Everyone agreed it would change everything. After 3 weeks of deliberation, President Hayes called for a worldwide referendum. Every human old enough to understand the question would vote. Accept the Vereen gifts and risk conflict. Refuse them and remain vulnerable. Or accept with conditions and try to reshape humanity's role in the galaxy. Jack Harper, watching the vote tallies come in from Aurora Station, thought about Danny Walsh and the others who had died protecting Kethera's ship. They had sacrificed themselves because it was right, not because it was safe or profitable. He hoped humanity would remember that lesson. The results came in over the course of 48 hours as votes were tallied from 17 colony worlds and Earth itself. The decision was close but clear. Humanity would accept the gifts under Kethera's terms. They would use the technology primarily for defense and humanitarian aid. They would become the galaxy's protectors, not its conquerors. Lisa Grant transmitted the decision to Kethera. "We accept your gifts with gratitude and responsibility. Humanity will use these tools to defend those who cannot defend themselves. We'll show the galaxy that kindness isn't weakness and that power doesn't require domination." Kethera performed the completion ceremony of the blood debt, formally releasing herself from the obligation while binding humanity and the Vereen together as allies. Technical teams began the knowledge transfer immediately. Human engineers studied dimensional fold drives. Scientists learned adaptive matter synthesis. Medical teams examined genetic optimization protocols. Warlord Threxus the Conqueror studied the tactical displays in his war room, with the cold calculation of a predator. The Krill had built an empire on fear and overwhelming force. Every species they had conquered, they had done so by striking fast and hard before their enemies could organize a defense. But humanity was different. Humanity had allies now and technology that made them dangerous. "They are still weak," his chief strategist insisted. "The humans have only begun to integrate Vereen technology. Their crews are still learning to use dimensional drives. Their shipyards are still adapting to matter synthesis. Strike now before they become truly formidable." Threxus agreed. He had already lost face with the humiliating defeat at Vexor Prime. His subordinate warlords questioned his strength. The client species who served the Dominion whispered about rebellion. He needed a decisive victory, and he needed it now. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Commit 70% of the Krill fleet to simultaneous strikes on 3 critical targets: Earth itself, the Vereen sanctuary worlds, and the largest Free Worlds Coalition members. Destroy humanity's homeworld and their alien benefactors in one crushing blow. Show the galaxy that the Krill Dominion remained the ultimate power. Send the fleets, Threxes ordered. Show them that mercy is weakness and compassion is death. The Krill war machine moved. 3 massive armadas departed from staging areas across Dominion space. They used stolen jump drives, pirated dimensional technology, and quantum stealth systems acquired from a dozen conquered species. The attack would be the largest military operation the galaxy had seen in centuries, but the Guardian initiative wasn't blind. Intelligence operative Jake Morris, working with Vereen Information Networks, detected the fleet movements 3 days before the attacks. He immediately transmitted warnings to Earth, the Vereen worlds, and all Free Worlds Coalition members. They're coming in force, Jake reported to the Joint Military Command. This isn't a raid or a border skirmish. This is total war. They want to destroy us before we can fully integrate the new technology. Admiral Ben Cole, promoted after his role in detecting the first Vereen signal, now commanded the defense of Earth. His fleet had been upgraded with early model dimensional fold drives and adaptive shields, but the technology was still experimental. They had trained with it for only 6 months. Against a battle-hardened Krill armada, would it be enough? Earth's defense grid activated. Orbital platforms, rebuilt with matter synthesis, bristled with weapons. The civilian population evacuated to underground shelters, millions of people descending into the massive bunker complexes built during humanity's early paranoid years in space. Everyone remembered what the Krill had done to the Terrak Confederacy. 3 billion lives extinguished in 7 days. Earth would not go quietly. The Krill arrived like a storm. 112 warships materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system, their weapons already charging. Threxes himself commanded the assault, his flagship leading the formation. Ben Cole stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Guardian's Hope, and watched them come. His fleet numbered only 18 vessels, but they were no longer conventional warships. Each ship carried dimensional fold drives that allowed instant repositioning. Each hull was reinforced with adaptive armor that could shift density and composition in response to incoming fire. All ships, execute Protocol Phantom, Ben ordered. The human fleet disappeared, not through conventional stealth but through rapid dimensional folding. They marked positions throughout the solar system and began jumping between them at random intervals. To Krill sensors, it appeared that there were hundreds of human ships, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. The first Krill wave entered Earth's orbit and found themselves under fire from positions that shouldn't have been possible. Human railguns, enhanced with matter synthesis to fire projectiles at near-light speed, punched through shields designed to stop conventional weapons. Missiles appeared from dimensional folds, bypassing point defense systems entirely. Ben coordinated the defense like conducting an orchestra. Ships would fold into position, fire devastating volleys, then fold away before the Krill could return fire effectively. The Guardian's Hope appeared above the Krill flagship, fired a full broadside into its command tower, then vanished before Threxes could even give the order to return fire. The battle lasted 7 hours. By the end, 23 Krill ships floated as debris in Earth's orbit. The rest retreated, jumping away to regroup. They had expected an easy slaughter. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought by a species that had been in space for barely a century. Ben stood on his bridge, exhausted but victorious. They had lost 2 ships, the Defender and the Resolute, but Earth was safe. The defensive platforms had held. The civilian population would emerge from the shelters to find their world intact, but the war was far from over. Reports came in from other battlefronts. The Vereen sanctuary worlds had repelled their attackers with minimal effort. Cathera's forces had trapped an entire Krill fleet in a dimensional maze from which they would never escape. But the Free Worlds Coalition members had suffered. Several smaller species, newly joined to humanity's alliance, had seen their worlds invaded. The turning point came at Threshold Station, a massive trading hub that served as the economic heart of the Free Worlds Coalition. If the Krill captured it, they could cut supply lines and strangle the alliance. Admiral Kyle Barnes, commanding a joint human-Vereen task force, arrived to find the station under siege. The Krill had learned from their earlier defeats. They weren't attacking in predictable patterns. They had adapted their tactics using their own captured dimensional technology to counter human advantages. The battle around Threshold Station raged for 2 days without clear advantage to either side. Kyle consulted with Cathera, who commanded the Vereen portion of the task force. Together, they developed a desperate strategy. They would use dimensional fold technology not as a defensive tool, but as a weapon. They would trap the entire Krill fleet in a folded space pocket, cutting them off from reinforcement and resupply. It's never been done on this scale, Cathera warned. The power requirements are enormous. We'll need to link our generators together, human and Vereen working in perfect synchronization. If we fail, the dimensional backlash could destroy both fleets. If we don't try, the Krill will eventually overwhelm us through sheer numbers, Kyle replied. Sometimes the only way forward is to take a risk that terrifies you. They executed the plan with precision born of desperate necessity. Human ships and Vereen vessels formed a geometric pattern around the Krill fleet. Their dimensional generators linked through quantum entanglement. Energy surged through the network, millions of terawatts channeled into reshaping local spacetime. Reality folded. The Krill fleet, over 60 ships strong, suddenly found themselves trapped in a pocket dimension. They could see normal space through the barrier, could even send communications, but they couldn't cross back. They were isolated, helpless, watching as their supplies dwindled and their options disappeared. Warlord Threxus, commanding from his flagship in another sector, watched his invasion collapse. The attack on Earth had failed. The assault on the Vereen worlds had ended in disaster. Now his main fleet was trapped in a dimensional prison with no clear means of escape. The client species that served the Dominion, seeing Krill weakness, began to rebel. The Jarn Collective, enslaved for 2 years, rose up against their Krill overseers. The industrial worlds that had been forced to produce weapons for the Dominion shut down their factories. Across Krill space, the empire that Threxus had built through terror and strength began to crumble. Humanity did something unexpected then. Rather than pressing their advantage with more violence, they offered peace. Ambassador Lisa Grant transmitted a message to all Krill-held territories. Surrender and we will help you rebuild. Continue fighting and you will be destroyed. The choice is yours. Species that had suffered under Krill rule began to surrender. They contacted human representatives, begging for protection from Dominion reprisals. The Guardian Initiative, true to its name, sent ships to defend these newly liberated worlds. Medical supplies, food, and reconstruction materials flowed through dimensional fold gates to planets that had known only war for years. Captain Melanie Ford commanded the Horizon on one of these mercy missions. She arrived at a Jarn colony world expecting resistance and found grateful refugees instead. The insectoid Jarn people, freed from Krill slavery, performed ceremonies of thanks in their clicking language. "Why do you help us?" the Jarn elder asked through a translator. "We surrendered to the Krill without fighting. We were cowards while you were brave. Why show us kindness?" Melanie thought about Jack Harper's story, about how he had saved Cathera even though it cost him his career and his friends. Because we remember what it's like to be weak. Because we know that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. Because showing mercy is never weakness. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a gradual collapse of Krill will to fight. Threxus himself died when his flagship was destroyed by his own officers, who hoped surrendering would save their lives. The Krill Dominion, which had threatened to consume the galaxy, fractured into. The Galactic Council chambers on Sanctum Prime had never been so divided. For thousands of years, these halls had been the center of galactic governance, where ancient species made decisions that shaped the destiny of younger civilizations. But today, the careful order that had maintained stability for millennia was crumbling. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood at the central platform, addressing representatives from over 300 species. Some were allies now, members of the Free Worlds Coalition. Others remained loyal to the old council structure, and many were undecided, watching to see which way the political winds would blow. "The War of 3 Weeks proved something important," Lisa began, her voice calm but carrying weight. "It proved that cooperation defeats conquest, that compassion and strength are not opposites, that young civilizations can teach old ones new ways of thinking." The Torval representative, whose people had dominated galactic politics for 10,000 years, rippled with agitation. "Humanity speaks of cooperation while wielding technology that could destroy us all. You claim to be protectors, but who protects the galaxy from you?" It was a fair question, and Lisa had been expecting it. The Torval and their allies in the next collective had spent months since the war's end, trying to undermine human influence. Economic sanctions, trade blockades, Diplomatic pressure on species considering joining the Free Worlds Coalition. None of it had worked as well as they hoped. "We protect the galaxy by keeping our promises," Lisa replied. "Every world we defended during the Krill invasion has been returned to its people. Every species that asked for help received it, regardless of whether they could offer anything in return. We haven't claimed territory, demanded tribute, or installed puppet governments. We've simply done what we said we would do." In the audience, representatives from species that humanity had helped nodded in agreement. The Jarn Collective, freed from Krill slavery, owed their survival to human intervention. The Terrak Confederacy, rebuilt from the ashes of their destroyed worlds, had received massive aid with no strings attached. Dozens of smaller species had similar stories, but the old powers remained unconvinced. They saw the Free Worlds Coalition not as a defensive alliance, but as a threat to their dominance. They watched human ships equipped with Vereen technology and feared what would happen if humanity decided to stop being generous and start being ambitious. The debate continued for hours. Proposals were made and rejected. Compromises were suggested and dismissed. The council was deadlocked, unable to move forward, but unwilling to accept the changes sweeping through galactic society. Meanwhile, humanity continued its work. The Guardian Initiative, now operating across 50 systems, focused on disaster relief and defense. When a solar flare threatened the agricultural world of Planara 7, human ships equipped with dimensional shields diverted the radiation. When pirates attacked mining colonies in the outer sectors, Guardian patrols responded within hours. Admiral Ben Cole, now commanding the entire Guardian fleet, established rapid response teams throughout Coalition space. His ships used dimensional fold technology to maintain a presence everywhere simultaneously. Crime dropped. Trade flourished. Species that had lived in fear of raiders and warlords for generations began to thrive. But Ben understood something that many didn't. Power and goodwill were temporary without institutional support. The Guardian Initiative needed to become more than just a military force. It needed to become a framework for lasting peace. He discussed this with Jack Harper, who at 93 years old had become something of a living legend. The old admiral spent his days consulting with younger officers, sharing the lessons he had learned over decades of service. His memoirs had been published and become required reading at every military academy in human space. "You can't force peace on people," Jack told Ben during one of their regular conversations. "You can only create conditions where peace becomes possible. That means building trust, establishing systems that work fairly for everyone, and sometimes making sacrifices so that others can prosper." "Like you did with the Vereen," Ben said. "Like we all do, every day when we choose compassion over convenience. The question isn't whether humans are capable of doing the right thing. The question is whether we'll keep doing it when it costs us something." That conversation stuck with Ben as he planned the Guardian Initiative's long-term strategy. Humanity couldn't maintain its current level of intervention forever. The fleet was stretched thin. Resources were being diverted from colony development and scientific research. They needed a sustainable approach. The solution came from an unexpected source. President Linda Hayes, approaching the end of her second term, proposed a radical restructuring of galactic governance. Instead of the old council system, where ancient empires held permanent seats and younger species waited centuries for meaningful representation, she suggested a federal model based on population and economic contribution. Every species gets a voice, proportional to their numbers and their participation. In galactic commerce, she announced in a historic address, decisions are made democratically with regular elections and term limits. The old empires keep their influence, but they share it with the rest of us. The galaxy becomes a republic instead of an oligarchy. The Torval and Next Collective rejected the proposal immediately. They had no intention of surrendering their privileged positions. But many other species found the idea appealing. The middle-tier civilizations, who had always been subordinate to the ancient powers, saw an opportunity for real representation. The younger species, inspired by humanity's example, demanded change. Sanctum Prime became a battleground of diplomacy and political maneuvering. Lisa Grant worked tirelessly, building coalitions, negotiating compromises, and demonstrating that the new system could work without destroying the stability that the old council had provided. The breakthrough came when the Vereen formally endorsed the restructuring. Cathara, now recognized as one of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, made a simple statement. The Varine survived because humanity showed us compassion when we were weak. We thrived because we learned to adapt and change. Any civilization that refuses to grow becomes extinct. The galaxy must choose between evolution and stagnation. Her words carried weight. The Varine had proven their strength during the war. Their technology remained superior to anything else in the galaxy. If they supported humanity's proposal, opposing it became politically untenable for many species. Over the following months, the old Galactic Council system gradually transformed. Some changes happened through formal votes. Others happened through simple momentum as more species joined the Free Worlds Coalition and adopted its principles. The Torval Empire and Next Collective fought every step, but they were outnumbered by species ready for change. A year after the War of 3 Weeks ended, the new Galactic Assembly held its first session. Representatives from over 400 species gathered, each with voting power proportional to their population and economic participation. Humanity held significant influence due to their large population and thriving colonies, but they were not dominant. The system worked exactly as designed, fairly, transparently, and democratically. Jack Harper attended the opening ceremony from a wheelchair, his health finally failing after 9 decades of life. He sat in the audience next to Cathara, who had insisted on being present for this moment. Together they watched as President Linda Hayes took the podium to deliver the inaugural address. This assembly exists because 41 years ago, a human captain made a choice, Linda began. He chose compassion over safety, honor over orders, the survival of strangers over his own career. That choice created a debt. The repayment of that debt gave humanity the tools to defend the galaxy, and our use of those tools demonstrated that power and kindness are not contradictory concepts. She paused, looking directly at Jack. Admiral Jack Harper is here today. He probably doesn't remember all the consequences of his actions on that day in the border zones. But we remember. The galaxy remembers. Because humanity never forgets a favor. And our way of saying thanks changed everything. The assembled representatives stood and applauded. Species that had never agreed on anything found common ground in honoring the moment that had led to this new beginning. Jack felt tears on his weathered cheeks. He thought about Danny Walsh and the others who had died protecting that Varine ship. He thought about all the years wondering if he had made the right choice, if the consequences had been worth the cost. Cathara placed one of her 4 hands on his shoulder. Your species taught mine something precious, she said quietly. You taught us that civilization is measured not by its technology or its power, but by its willingness to help those who cannot help themselves. That lesson transformed us, and through us it transformed you, and now together we are transforming the galaxy. Will it last? Jack asked. Will future generations remember why we did this? Some will forget, Cathara admitted. Some will grow cynical or selfish, but enough will remember. And those who remember will teach others. Your legacy isn't just this new government or the Guardian Initiative. Your legacy is the idea that kindness matters, that debts of honor should be repaid, and that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak.